Hello, friends, and welcome to Experience AV Episode 1. We are your hosts. I'm Jim Maltese, my partner.
Go ahead.
No, that's what I was hoping you jump in.
This is what happens when you decide to do a live AV podcast right here. You have no plan going in, and it gets interesting real quick.
That's exactly right. So let's try that again. We're your hosts. I'm Jim Maltese.
And I'm Jeremy Elsesser.
Hell yeah, that's what it's about. And this is Episode 1, man. Welcome. How you feeling?
I'm feeling really good, man. I'm really excited to be here. This has been a long time coming.
Yes. Yeah, we are very excited to share some stories, to do some fun things. I figure this first episode we'll spend some time just introducing ourselves, letting people know who we are, and then talk a little bit about what we see for the show, and hopefully whet some appetites and get people excited.
I love it. I think that's a good first out here. Like I mentioned already, we had a bit of a loose plan in terms of coming together and producing something, but a lot of this is off the cuff and all about getting together for an interesting conversation. So why don't you kick it off, Jim, with what I like to call the AV origin story? Who are you?
Dig it.
Who are you? How did you get into AV, or how did AV get into you? Maybe that's the better
Yeah,
question.
yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people kind of stumble into AV either through, you know, random different meanderings through life, and they find this AV industry that they grow to love. But I was actually born in AV. I was born into the industry. My father, Mario Maltese, owned one of the largest AV companies in the Northeast in the 80s and 90s. It actually spawned a lot of really large AV companies that are alive and kicking and kind of taking names in New York still. So I grew up attending Christmas parties with folks that would become AV industry giants in the New York area and the world. So AV was just kind of in my blood from the get-go, and they would see me as just some annoying kid running around at the different events and the company picnics and whatnot. My first job in AV was actually in high school, where I would build racks in my backyard or in my garage, my parents' garage. My father at the time worked for an AV company in New Jersey, but they had a lot of work in New York and on Long Island. So it just made sense to kind of ship the equipment out to Long Island. I'd put it together. We had a few project managers and some technicians. Shout out to Scott Sasso,
What's
who
up,
kind of
Scott?
guided me through. Hell yeah, guided me through everything, and that's where I kind of cut my teeth. Um, I went to college, and in between my bachelor's and my master's, I played an AV engineer for a year, and I just didn't like it. You know, I enjoyed the technology. I really liked the people I work with, but the atmosphere in that particular company just didn't sit well with me. And so I swore that AV stint was going to be my last. And it was just like a starter high school job, college job type of thing. And I would move on to building robotic prosthetics like Luke Skywalker and Empire Strikes Back, as you do. But
Natural
when I,
progression,
that's
obvious. Yeah,
100%,
yeah.
100%. Um, but when I, when the time came for me to find a real job, college was done. The only people that were hiring were shoe companies, and I guess I was a little prima donna. I didn't feel like spending my days tuning sneakers for runners and just looking at shoes all day. It wasn't really my thing. And as luck would have it, my father was looking to change jobs at the same time. And so he asked if I wanted to start a company with him. So number one, I was young and naive. I didn't have anything else lined up. And I knew I didn't want to go back to AV, but the chance to start and own an AV company was different. It was new, it was exciting. I love my father, so it was all good. So in April 2001, we started Audiovisual Resources, and that was my first like career AV step, if you will. And so at AVR, Our claim to fame was our testing and verification services and process. That's what we offered. In the beginning, we didn't really know what we wanted to do. Were we designers? Were we installers? We were kind of flipping and flopping and just trying to find our way. But in 2003, a very large financial firm was doing a global conference room upgrade that spanned countries and designers and installers, and they were looking for a way to make sure those systems were consistently deployed. At AVR, you know, Mario and AVR was very big into quality process and having things documented and just having that methodical approach to AV. So at the time of that global conference room upgrade, we said, hey, we've got this great process. We can design, review, stage, and commission the whole thing. And now no matter who installed it, designed it, or whatever, AVR can come in and just make sure it's done consistently around the world. And it was very successful. And that's where third-party testing and verification from AVR started, was with this one huge conference room upgrade. And so that was our claim to fame, is as this third-party testing and verification. It was high-risk work. It was great work. But it was high risk in that we were selling our integrity. We had to protect the client's interest and make sure that they got everything that they expected. But at the same time, we needed to have a very good working relationship with the designers and installers we were testing. But because our process was so methodical, because it was documented, because everyone knew what to expect and where we were coming from, we were able to kind of thread that needle of fighting for the client and playing nice with the AV team. We threaded that needle very successfully. And we enjoyed a very good, at least I hope, reputation in the industry. And so that was what we would do for a while. Then in 2010, a very large, I don't even know what you'd call them now, just a network giant, I guess the network giant, came to us asking if we could devise a method to determine what integrators were doing a good job. This particular network giant was getting into video conferencing at that time. They had a lot of integrators putting their systems in. And they were very nervous that if an integrator did a poor job putting a system in, that they would say, you know what, rip out everything with that particular manufacturer's name on it. I don't want it in the building. I don't want it anywhere. We can't have that happen. How can we make sure any integrator that touch our video conference stuff does a good job? So they came to AVR thinking that as this third-party testing team, we would have some way to do that. And we're like, well, yeah, I mean, just, as long as someone is doing a design review and staging the systems and commissioning, they're a quality-minded integrator. And so why don't we just share that process and kind of let that network giant roll with that? And so that was great. The network giant went with it. It was part of their integrator onboarding process. But we thought we had something kind of cool, and we were always interested in elevating the industry a little bit, with helping with Infocom and teaching there. And so we were like, well, why don't we start a nonprofit to manage this process, to manage this quality management process for AV? And so the AV 9000 standard was born, and AQAV, the nonprofit, was born to manage that standard. And so I'm gonna not talk about how we met. I'm going to give that to you because you do a way better job explaining that. It's just you're a much better storyteller than me. So I'm going to save that for you.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. But so fast forward 8 years. And then in 2009, because of this wonderful relationship that was formed with Level 3, my partners, Laura and Mario, were looking to retire. We figured it was the cleanest way to kind of end that partnership. So we wanted to sell AVR. We had a wonderful relationship with Level 3 AV. We loved the culture. We loved the team. We loved the management. And it was just, from my opinion, from my perspective, a match made in heaven. And so now I am very happily part of the Level 3 team. I am very happily the vice president of quality standards there. And that's kind of my story to where we are now. And now, not only that, but I am the co-host of Experience AV.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm super happy.
Man, you told a great story there, and there's going to be little things that come out of that over the next several conversations that spawn long-standing conversations. To say that you and your father and quite frankly your whole company is about elevating the industry is humble understatement. You guys have been a huge contributor to the industry at large, both through AQAV as well as Avixa and the content and all the awesome stuff you guys developed with Avixa back in the day. So I mean, there's just years and years and years of AV DNA within your bloodline, which is really cool. For me, just having you as a friend and as a coworker, because it's always nice to have that connection back to the early days, like the archival history of what the AV industry was. So man, you're understated in your capability and your experience within this industry. Um,
Thanks, man.
so origin story. I love the idea of an origin story. It kind of comes from comic books, right? What's the origin of a particular superhero? I think we in AV like to think we're superheroes or like to make
Of
superheroes
course.
and like to make our customers into heroes. Like the hero thing is kind of a big deal in the AV industry. So I also found, like I stated at the beginning, usually people don't go looking for AV. It's getting a little bit better out there. I think with a lot of efforts being done by the associations and by public outreach from the integration teams, and it's becoming more the norm because AV is more the norm. The technology's everywhere. It's being used all the time, so it's getting to be less of an afterthought and more of a front of mind thought. But generally, people don't graduate high school and they're like, I'm gonna go pull cable and I'm gonna install displays and I'm gonna tune sound systems for corporate conference rooms for the rest of my life, right? That job description didn't usually get handled by the high school counselor or the college counselor. So I usually ask people if I'm interviewing them, especially for a position within the industry. Tell me your origin story. How did you get into AV, or how did AV get into you? Because again, we don't go looking for this stuff. We usually just kind of happen into it. And then I think as many of the people that we may benefit from watching this show or participating, many of our network, our friends, my friends, Jim's friends would all, I think, confirm that, once you found the AV industry, once you fell into it, it was hook, line, and sinker, right? We fell in love with the technology. We fell in love with the people. We fell in love with the connection. We fell in love with going to Infocom, which I'm really looking forward to getting back to Infocom.
Yes,
Just
please.
stating that for everybody, the
Yes.
obvious. But it's good. We fell in love with the experience, right? And I think that's a little bit of the genesis of how we came up with the name for this show as well. Experience interfacing with technology, experience interfacing with people and with process. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but my origin story, how I got into AV, is an interesting one. I have to go back to my first professional job, which was technically during high school on the weekends, running lighting and sound for a nightclub. And prior to that actually being a paying gig, I was very involved with the early dance music movement in the 90s here in Arizona. So you might have found me out in the middle of the desert setting up large sound systems and lighting systems to support all night, mostly permitted rave dance parties.
Mostly permitted.
And that was an interesting introduction. Large live sound, all the stuff that comes along with producing live events and the audio experience that comes with all of that. um, but I still didn't even know at that time that a commercial integration organization, like that the commercial AV integration industry existed. I had no idea. Had no idea that there was a whole world out there. Um, Going through high school, I knew pretty quickly that I wanted to work with computers. That was identified pretty young. Fast learner, easy to consume software and kind of get it and kind of consume it and start be able to use the tools. So I thought I would, eventually become a computer person. That evolved through high school and turned into wanting to become a network person. So after graduating high school, I had to get a job. My first real job outside of the weekend nightclub, getting paid to run some lighting and sound at a nightclub, was a commercial electrician job with a guy named Ben Pepper. Shout out to Ben Pepper in Colorado. Um, he was is a really great journeyman electrician. I think he's a master electrician now, as a matter of
Mm.
fact, who invited me to come learn being an electrician with him. And so I did that for a couple of years while I was going to school to be a network administrator. There was a point where, through my research and learning and the computer side of things, I had kind of landed on network technology and network engineering as being the pursuit that I wanted to have from a college study perspective. So I started taking Cisco networking classes, Cisco certification classes in the evenings, working in as an electrician during the day. Here's where it gets interesting. The very first day of my electrical career, so many years ago, I showed up on a job site that was a restaurant called Jilly's here in Arizona. I'm over here in Arizona. It was in Chandler, and it was the first day that it was a brand new build, new construction, new restaurant, and we were stepping foot on it for the first time as the electrical contractor that had won the job, and we were building this building from the first panel all the way through the last receptacle being put in. Well, lo and behold, Level 3 Audiovisual was the AV company that had won the bid for doing the AV system for this restaurant as well. And of course, back then I was an electrician and we totally thought low voltage people and AV people were idiots because that's how you're brought up in the electrical world. I mean, I got to be a part of it. So it's not just rumor, and
You've
and
seen both sides.
I've seen both sides, and it's like because we're dealing with 120 volts and above and we can actually get hurt, we're somehow better than you low voltage people. I say that because I find it hilarious as I got deeper and deeper into the commercial integration industry at how complex what we do is, like significantly more complex than fundamentals of electrical. Granted, there's life safety, there's
Yes.
people, there's a lot of things from an electrical standpoint that drive a whole nother world of consideration, and I don't want to downplay that, but it is interesting the mindset that electricians carry with low voltage people. Again, I think that's blurred significantly as well because there's a lot of electricians that have gotten into low voltage, and a lot of those lines are getting blurred from a contracting standpoint.
For
So
sure.
I'm an electrician. I'm going to school to be a network administrator, and level 3 is the AV company doing the AV system that I have to provide all the electrical stuff for in this restaurant. And I'm kind of like, hey, what you guys do is really cool and really sexy and looks more fun than being an electrician. We should start talking. And so we started talking. There was a good conversation that started. And I actually took off a couple of weeks of vacation from being an electrician to go pull wire and install AV at a hotel project with level 3 and kind of be like, maybe make a change from the electrical. So while I was still at Hayden Electric was the name of the company, going to school to be a network engineer, I met my next boss in my class. His name was Chris McGee. It was at Southwest College of Naturopathic Healing and Medicine. It's a college here in Arizona where you can go get your ND. He was looking for a number two in his IT department. It was a one-man IT team. He happened
Mm.
to be in one of my Cisco certification classes. We hit it off. He invited me to come interview for the position. And although I had taken some time off and kind of was courting with level three a little bit, I said, hey, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go do this because this is actually what I'm going to school for. And I'm going
Right.
to go be an IT guy and learn network in a production environment and try to help support what I had chosen as my go forward skill plan. So I went and did that, maintained a relationship with Brad, Brad Peterson. He's the owner of Level 3 Audiovisual, maintained a relationship with him and Lisa and the whole group, and went and was an IT network engineer for about 2.5, almost 3 years. It was an incredible experience. Got the opportunity to run a IT department that really needed 4 or 5 people, but there was only two of us. So we got an opportunity to do a lot of different things and get exposed to a lot of different things from an IT perspective. During that time, I helped Level 3 stop using pirated software and get into laptop computers and start supporting. And I tell this story because this is literally like almost 20 years ago. And when you're a three, four, 5 man shop, 5 man business, you do what it takes from a software standpoint to
Yeah.
get up and running. And I remember meeting them and being like, oh, you guys have to pay for software. Like, this is a business. It's really important that you pay for the software that you use
I'm,
for the
I'm,
business.
I'm sure the statute of limitations has run out by now. We're good.
Oh, we're way good. We pay for all
Yeah.
our software now. So I helped them with IT support through those couple of years that I maintained a relationship with them. Come in, help them out, build up some computers, make sure that their software was working, get email configured, those types of things. So it was during those couple of years that Brad had a partner back then who they were looking to separate ways and go forward separately, with Brad as primary owner of Level 3 and his partner moving on to other things. And when he did that, his partner was the AMX programmer of the company.
Mm.
And so back then, we didn't even use Crestron. Like, we didn't even have Crestron's name in our, like, we didn't have the price book from Crestron on the price book, bookcase from Crestron. We were at AMX House. We did all AMX. That was the only thing that we did. And so they sent me an email and they were like, hey, have you ever heard of AMX programming? And I'm like, no, what is this? Sent me a link to amx.com. I'm looking at it. It was the year that they started using Netlink's processors. So it was the year that AMX put a Ethernet port on the back of their, what was it, Accent 3, I think was the
Yeah, yeah,
was that right? Accent 3 processor, they put a network port. And so of course I'm like, well, it has a network port on it, so I'm going to be fine because I'm a network guy. It's not a big deal. And I've also done some object oriented programming. So he said, hey, come join us, learn AV, need you to learn programming. And at that point, I had worked at the college for about 2.5 years. I didn't get a raise the entire time I was at the college.
Ugh,
It was a really interesting management and leadership experience while I was at the college that helped form a little bit of who I am in terms of how I like to manage and to lead. And I feel like my boss lost a really good asset that he probably could have kept in me, and it helped teach me a super valuable lesson to not let good employees, get away from you when, if you're not proactive with them, then eventually somebody else is going to come along with a better offer and scoop them up and offer something. And so I went ahead and left and joined Level 3. Geez, it's been almost 17 years ago now. We were a tiny
really.
little company under $3 million in revenue, less than 10 people in the entire organization. I got the opportunity to, found commercial AV and was like, wow, this is the coolest industry ever. This is the sexiest side of technology. And what was really cool for me anyway is everybody in the AV industry at that time had started to talk about the AV IT convergence, the fact that AV was starting to sit on networks, the fact that IT people were starting to take AV jobs and AV responsibility. I mean, and here we are literally 17 years later, and we're still having that conversation to a large degree. But it was great for me because when I landed in AV, I had the network chops, I had the IT
Right.
chops, I had spent the time doing, enterprise grade networking, data center based networking. I had spent that time and had that skill set. So I got to just come over and focus on being an AV guy, which was great for level three at the time. It was great for me. A lot of the services, a lot of the clients, a lot of the products that we were pitching are very IT heavy, and with the IT capabilities that we had, we were able to navigate that pretty well. And so then I just got to focus on being an AV guy. And again, that was to wrap up the origin story. That was 17 years ago, and so I've had the opportunity. I've never worked for another AV integration firm outside of level three. Again, shout out to Brad Peterson for creating one of the most incredible cultures that I think exists. And and
Absolutely.
and and that's really what keeps people, at a particular company, is the culture that exists there. But I've never had another AV company, and I had the opportunity to be a technician. I had the opportunity to be a project manager, a lead technician, a programmer. I ran our programming department for a number of years. I went and learned engineering. I learned CAD. I built our CAD department a long, long time ago, at least the framework. I mean, to see where everybody has taken it now, and now, I get the absolute distinct pleasure and privilege of serving level three in a leadership role, and helping continue to navigate all that is happening in the AV industry and in the commercial business world, and continuing to find really cool, interesting, creative solutions to support the needs in that space. And um, that's my AV origin story. That's how I got here, and definitely don't plan on going anywhere.
I love it.
Uh,
I
you
love
tou
it.
you touched on, to continue just a little bit further here. You touched on the origin of us and how we got connected together, and we got to be careful here because there's some clients and folks we got to protect,
Yes.
from a naming
Yeah.
perspective,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
so the client who shall not be named
Yes. I don't
is.
even know if we can do like a rhymes with because
No, it's like
you know. Yeah.
it's like a tiny little
Right.
financial institution, regional, really,
Yeah.
more than
A couple
anything.
$1 billion in profit a quarter. Yeah. One of the little guys.
Yeah, just one of those little ones. That was a mutual client of mine and Jim's, or level threes and AVRs, is a better way to put that. And through the mutual introduction of the client, we started to learn about AV9000. We started to learn about AQAV, and we started to learn about this company AVR, who provided third party testing and verification. And I might save some of that origin story for another conversation because it can be a fairly long one. But suffice to say that we did a project and found out that we were going to be AV9000, and went and paid to take the classes, got certified, spent some quality time with Mario in the shop in Long Island, got certified, came back, ran the staging checklist, ran the commissioning checklists, and had incredible success with that mutually shared client. And that really, I'm really minimizing the story right now because we will come back to it in future
Yeah.
episodes. But it really kicked off what became an amazing relationship between level 3 and AVR, and level 3 and AQAV, and ultimately level 3 and Avixa. It helped kickstart a whole bunch of education initiatives. Jim is super passionate about education and learning. I'm super passionate about education and learning. Getting connected together through a mutual client and doing really high quality AV work and AV commissioning work is really what brought us together. And the rest is history. I mean, it was brother from another mother. Where have you been? Why do you have to live in New York?
Yes, exactly.
Because that's really long ways away from Arizona,
Yeah.
Um, but again, we'll revisit that story more to come in the future. But it was, working together on a mutual client, and really having a tremendous amount of similarity and mindset, especially as it surrounds AV, the experience that is AV, quality. These are things that I think were threads of common ground that really brought us together really quickly. And then teaching and learning that passion. Once I got connected up with Jim, we started teaching and learning at Avixa and at Infocom. Jim had been teaching at Infocom for quite some time and invited me to come teach some of the CTSD classes at Infocom, which turned into an incredible experience.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, what do you want to add to that, Jim? Because literally I could
No,
talk for another 30 minutes on that,
yeah, no,
how
I
we
know, I
came
know. And
together.
and that's the thing. Like I think we both had mutual respect for each other on a professional level from that large, small client that we both worked with. But once we started teaching together, and I think that's where our friendship like just sparked and solidified, and we realized, I don't know, I consider you one of my closest friends, and I love spending time with you. And so I feel like that connection happened when we taught that CTSD class together.
Absolutely.
So I got crazy lucky with that.
Wow, CTSD, Infocom,
Yeah. Yeah.
Florida, if I'm correct, was that year, or was that Vegas the
I think it
first
was
year?
Vegas, because I remember sitting in a smoky casino with you, just talking about crazy stuff, and I'm like, this guy's really sharing this with me right now. Like it was.
I've been known to be an oversharer. I will
Yes,
I will
I
try to
love
keep
it.
it under control for the benefit of the
Yeah.
audience.
Yes. Yeah. I was that. Yeah. I remember that image distinctly. That's
Well,
good.
if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump into the fact that, we decided to do this as a live conversation. And so if you don't mind, let's segue into what are we why are we doing this? Why are we
Hell
here?
yeah.
What
Perfect.
what was the idea of putting this thing together? And just to be honest with everybody that's out there, we're learning. This is our first
Yes.
podcast together. We're figuring this stuff out as we go, trying to figure out the timing. We've actually been at this for 35 minutes. We've been live for 35 minutes, so the time goes by really, really quickly. So,
Yeah, it does.
I think we had a goal of like somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes, with like 45 minutes being the kind of target time frame. So
Yes.
we got about 10 minutes left, which means let's
Boom.
transition a little bit into, what does this mean to you? What are you trying to get out of this, Jim?
Absolutely. So I want to split it up. I've been thinking about this a bit. I want to split it up into why we want to do the podcast and why we think people will listen. So, why I want to do the podcast, number one, I think it's going to be a blast. I happen to love podcasts. I love the medium. I like the idea of people just actually talking instead of reading, or like I feel like it's very interactive. I really like that about podcasts. Um, and then I love talking about AV. Like I don't know how many people this will connect to, but Bill and Jay's Excellent Tequila Party at Infocom is such a fun time. Like it's so good, and it's just people in a relaxed environment after hours talking AV, and they're brilliant and they're funny and they're just relaxed, and I want more of that. Like I'm sick of waiting for Infocom. I'm sick of waiting for these industry things. Like I want to foster a community where more of that happens. And if the podcast can spark that, I want to do that. And then I also like spending the time to explore things, technology and business ideas and industry trends. And selfishly, I think the podcast is going to help me wrap my head around certain things that I want to know more information about. And then lastly, I get to hang out with one of my best friends while I do this and talk AV and talk business. So for me, I think it's going to be just a really great time. That's why I want to do this podcast or this show. It's not a podcast, right? I don't even know what it is.
We haven't even figured out exactly what it
Yeah,
is yet,
this
but
thing.
it's a
Yeah,
thing. It's going to involve some Facebook Live. It's going to
yeah,
involve a
yeah.
podcast. There's going to be a YouTube channel. Like, it's going to be a show.
It's an experience,
Hey, I like that. It is an
right?
experience. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let me jump in on my why. It's fairly similar to yours, but in reverse order. Number one reason, I like get to hang out with Jim. Like, sorry, super selfish. If y'all know Jim, if anybody on here knows Jim, then you know what a pleasure it is just hanging out with this guy and getting to spend any amount of time with him talking about any level of topic. So I'm fortunate in that I get to spend a fair amount of time with Jim as a coworker, but sometimes we don't always get to just free range with our conversation. So the goal with this was to essentially put some structure around creating some space and time for mine and Jim's interesting conversations. We wanted to document that. We wanted to share that with the world. We wanted to share it with our community and with our network within the industry. Which brings me to like my next biggest thing, which is connecting with people. And I think you did a great
Yes.
job, Jim, of kind of I desperately miss Infocom. I desperately miss getting together with so many people that we've met over the years, close friends, new friends, friends that you meet for the first time when you go out to the shows and you have this industry get together. We have a huge network of just some of the most incredible people that I've ever met in my life, and I haven't got to see them in like a year and a half, coming on
Exactly.
2 years. So
Yeah.
to be able to connect with the people that we love, respect, trust, and share this industry with, and quite frankly, this earth with, and that also want to geek out about AV, like this is the place for them. So that was a big why for me. Um, Getting into a little bit further of something you also, I think, put better words around than I was able to form in my head, which is I really like to research things and I like to geek out on things and I like to play with a product and see what it can do, even in my role today. And if you don't have some time set aside for that or you don't have some structure with that, it can be hard to make the time because we get busy doing all the
Yeah.
other things that life
It
throws
doesn't
at
happen.
us.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
we recently, you and I recently bench tested a Poly X30 X50 trio, and we like did this up, man. We bench tested this thing with the NTI tools, the talk box. I mean, we spent a whole day coming up with a test plan, recording results, and really getting some idea of how these things performed. And we had so much fun doing it, you know. So
Absolutely.
we want to do some of that on the podcast and on the show by essentially talking about and geeking out about some of the things that we play with every single day that gets us excited. It might be product, it might be process, it might be a conversation about leadership and management, it might be a philosophical concept that has nothing to do with AV or technology in general. But I would venture to say that the goal is to have everything be AV flavored
Yeah.
that we bring to the show.
Yeah. 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 I love that. And that's yeah. I mean I think we have a lot of exciting things. I think it also gives us an opportunity to invite guests on and kind of share that whole vibe with them and just if we wanted to know something about AV, we can call up a manufacturer and just take an in-depth look into what we're trying to figure out, like the stupid signal to noise and THD thing that um, we couldn't get it to work, and then all of a sudden, when you bypass the AEC processing, all of a sudden you get a clean signal. Like what's up with that? Why does that happen? How about we get a manufacturer on the show and figure out why that happens and why we need to do that? Just things like that.
And for those of you not testing THD, you should feel ashamed of yourselves. And for those of you who
Yes.
have no idea what THD even is, follow us. You're going to learn
Oh,
amazing things
yes.
about things you didn't even know you needed to know.
Yes. And bro, do you even AV if you don't THD? Like,
No THD,
what's
no
up?
AV, bro.
Yes. Yes. All right. So, why should people listen to this? Why should we bring them along for this journey?
Was that a question?
Yeah. Conversation starter.
Well, so who's the target, right? Who's the target audience? The target audience, I think, for us is friends of the industry. We're going to be talking some pretty techy, industry related stuff. Tech managers, end users, friends of the industry, other integrators, professional services, UCC managers, those types of things. Why are they going to follow? Well, number one, we have Jim Maltese.
Number Really, number one is we have Jeremy Elsesser.
Oh, come on. Your name's first on the logo. We showed it
It is
already.
true.
Yeah. It's
It
it's
is
actually
true. I'm very fancy.
it's actually right there if you yeah, right there. Yep.
Yeah, it is.
Um
Yeah, it is.
uh you know, people just like you, Jim, and I think a smaller subset of them might actually like me as well. So I'm banking on the fact that we have fun when we get together and that people will vibe off of that fun. Number 1. Number 2, if you're in AV or you're somehow connected to AV or you're somehow responsible to dealing with AV in your everyday professional life, we're probably going to have some valuable stuff in there for you. At least
Yes.
interesting stuff that applies to a varying number of threads within our industry. So, the goal is to bring some value to the AV industry at large in terms of some geeky stuff, some product stuff, some science stuff, some concept stuff that we'll do the work on and have some fun putting together a show and bringing it to the larger group at large. Larger group at large. We're just gonna roll with that.
Boom.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm excited about is I hope that we're going to offer something a little bit fresh and different than other shows like this out there, and that we're going to keep it conversational. We're going to keep it fresh. We're not going to have like a predefined set of questions where we just kind of round robin it. It's going to be a hang. It's going to be an AV hangout where we just take the time, get to know people, get to know what we're talking about, and really explore things to their fullest, or to when we get bored of it.
I love that, and I think that's going to be one of the most unique things about this. I mean, just starting it, it was like, wow, we're about to go live, so there's no script.
Yes.
No, there's no script. Now
Yes.
we're just going to talk and go for it, and that was kind of one of the big concepts that I think we carried into the idea of this was let's try to make it a conversation. Let's use the live aspects of going live to make it a conversation and force all the fun that comes with not getting a do-over.
I love it. I'm excited, man.
And the last thing, I guess I'll just say, Jim mentioned it already. We are hoping to have a number of guests on the show. We've both had the privilege of sitting on a number of podcasts or participating in a number of podcasts over the years. And it's always been really, really fun. And we've learned from each one of those. And we're, taking the learnings from those experiences into this experience for ourselves. And we definitely want to get a nice guest schedule going and bring in some of the other amazing minds from the industry to talk about a topic. So feel
Yes.
free to reach out to us if you want to get together for a conversation and share it live on Facebook and make a podcast with us. And if there's something that you're passionate about in AV, you can pretty much guarantee we're passionate about it as well. And we would love to talk to you about it. So reach out.
Yeah. Community is going to be a big part of this show. So definitely reach out.
Jim, I think we accomplished the mission, man.
I think we did it.
I think we gave a little bit of our origin story and a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish with this podcast. So With that, we're going to try and put these out about once every 2 weeks is the starting cadence. And thank everybody who listened in to this first one and joined us live here on Facebook Live. It means the world.
Yes,
Love for you to share this stuff and give us love as we continue to build upon this. And once Jim shares his final thoughts, I'll throw up a contact us page that'll just give you some additional contact details for how you can get a hold of us, or find our YouTube channel, or find us on Apple or Spotify.
absolutely. I don't have much to add. I think that was perfect. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to kick things off and get this community growing. And I'm just really looking forward to it.
Well, as always, Jim, it's an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to talking again in a couple weeks, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Talk to you later.
Bye bye, y'all.